I think we're live now. Hello everyone. My name is Matt Wade and I serve as your district editor. And so this video is dedicated to an editor training module that was taught at our FLACKI CLE training. And so this slide, we talked about like some introductions. This doesn't really pertain much to this video, but there's still some good questions on here to think about throughout your terms. Things like, what are you most excited to do as editor for your club? And what made you run for editor of your club? Alrighty, I think my face is in the way. Let me move that. Roles of a club editor. So these are some more like buzzwords that help describe some of the duties of a club editor. And so the first one is advertiser. You are the point person on your club board to advertise your club's events, club meetings, club socials, service events, openings for leadership positions, anything that your club needs to send a message out to your club members. You are also a communicator for your club, and this works with communication with the district board, communication with your local Kiwanians, communication with other Kiwanis family branches, such as Key Club in your area. And a lot of that is done through your newsletter, which we're going to get into later in this presentation. Following that, the next job title buzzword is related to public relations. And so with public relations, it's a lot of just consistency with social media posts. It kind of goes hand in hand back to advertiser and communication, just making sure that if your club has a message that needs to reach club members' ears or eyes or whatever, that you are properly relaying that information. And so this next bullet point is like a question that I would pose if we were having like a live session. So what are some other roles that the editor plays? And then I listed some examples. As an officer in general, you should always be an upstanding member of your club, going to as many service events as you can, planning service events, going above and beyond to represent your club to the best of its abilities. And then this next one's more specific to a club editor, which is the photographer. You go to service events and take pictures so that you have material for social media or your newsletters. And then et cetera is when we would start going into other topics. So for instance, historian for your club, and that is related back to the newsletters that we're going to get into later. Responsibilities. Alrighty, so this is a list of some general responsibilities that most club editors will be doing throughout their terms. This first one is probably the most important, creating a monthly or bi-monthly newsletter. Again, we're going to talk more about how to make a newsletter later in this PowerPoint, but making sure that your newsletter is a good representation of your club to potential members, your current members, Kiwanians, Key Clubbers, any community partners that you have, just a great way that you can represent your club. If someone asks, oh, why should I join CKI? You can point to the newsletter and say, oh, look at our past service events, things like that. Responsibility of promoting upcoming events and meetings through social media. So, platforms like Instagram and Facebook are great to keep your members updated on all things related back to your club. So promoting, maybe you have an upcoming meeting, an upcoming social service project. Maybe you have like a collaborative service project with another club and you can work with their club editor to come up with collaborative promotion. I don't know, just an idea off the top of my head. Responsibility of going to service projects and taking pictures for social media and newsletters. As I mentioned in the last slide, photographer is like a buzzword that's commonly related back to editors. And so with that, you want to make sure that your newsletters and social media posts are engaging and have real people in them. We're going to talk more about that later. I keep saying that, sorry. I should have just made my presentation better. But you should always have pictures ready somewhere. I would recommend creating a Google Drive dedicated to having pictures saved. creating an archive of pictures from multiple years. They help just to see what your club has been doing in past years around the same time. For instance, right now it's October, so maybe your club 3 years ago had an amazing project for Trick or Treat for UNICEF that you want to bring back, things like that. There's a sub point related to that. We would love it if you tagged at Florida Circle K so that the district can see what you're posting. District can then repost what you're doing, help you with your promotion, as well as just letting us know like what you're up to, because we're nosy. This next one is stay in contact with the district editor. That's me, by the way, on a weekly or monthly pattern. Wow, words. Weekly or monthly pattern. And so that just helps me to know what you're doing, how I can help you. Maybe you're creating your first newsletter and you don't really know what you're doing, even though you're watching this amazing presentation right now and you're going to know what you have to do. But maybe you have another question that wasn't answered in this PowerPoint through this presentation. And so great time to reach out to me, either email or my phone number, which we'll get into later. But yeah, submitting to Circle Capers. And so that is related to my newsletter. So since I'm a district editor, I also have a bi-monthly publication that I create called the Circle Capers, and it represents the entire district, not any one particular club or anything. And so I always try to make sure that those are as interactive as possible. Planning service projects and finding service organizations to work with. This responsibility might sound weird, but just as an officer in general, you should be responsible for functions of your club. And so anyone on your board, even your members, can plan service projects and finding service organizations to work with, maybe finding other clubs on campus to work with. Don't be afraid to step out of a list of duties that you think you have to stay to so that you don't step on someone's toes. If you want to see something done, go for it. Like, why would anyone stop you? That's productive, you know? Alrighty. The newsletter, I've alluded to this so many times already in this really short presentation, but the newsletter, this is a permanent snapshot of your club's functions at a certain time. And so that might sound a little wishy-washy of a statement. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like, let's say you are in November and you don't have service project ideas. You know what's a great resource to see? A past November newsletter to see what your club did 1, 2, maybe even 3 years ago, and see, hey, this project looks cool. Let's try and do that again this November. And lo and behold, bam, you have a service project. As I said, past newsletters can be used by club boards for event inspiration. You know, your newsletters have a lot of different purposes. I personally think that that historical feature is probably one of the more important parts of the newsletter, but sometimes they're more of a social experience. So things like including member spotlights, including stuff that's happening in the local community outside of your club of CKI. Maybe your campus is having a huge event for anyone to go to and you want to plug that for your campus. I don't know, whatever you want your newsletter to be, it can pretty much be anything. Isn't that fun? The next big thing about your newsletter, keeping members informed. And so that's kind of generic, like what does that mean? Keeping your members informed about service projects, other club functions, maybe you are running a donation drive, district events or conventions. So right now we are preparing as a district board for our fall event. So maybe plugging that in a newsletter if it's released in time. That's coming up really soon though, so probably not, but like you can plug it if you want. And it should be sent to all club members. Posting it on social media, putting it on a club website if your club has one of those, sending it out in a club mailing list, making sure that as many people as possible see the hard work that you put in your newsletter so that it doesn't go to waste. Because one of the saddest things about being an editor is sometimes you kind of feel unappreciated. Your newsletters are like a cute like trophy to look at. And it's like, oh, our club does a newsletter. Not like it's that important, but it really is important if it's used properly. And so making sure that your newsletter has a clear purpose clear direction that it wants to go with is always a good idea to have. So this is dedicated to newsletter do's and don'ts. And so this slide's kind of confusing because we're not doing this as like a live workshop. So there's like an interactive activity here. You're supposed to say, oh, that's a good thing, or that other point's not a good thing, but we'll just go through it right now. On your cover, having the CTI logo, volume, and issue number, and coming up with a title for your newsletter. Is that a good thing? Is that a do, or is that a don't? It's a good thing. It's a do. I kind of feel like Dora the Explorer right there for a second. Like, what do we want from the backpack? I don't know. This is so awkward. Ugh. Anyways, including pictures from past events, good or bad, do or don't. It's clearly, obviously, a do. You always want to make sure that you have pictures from your past events. The only caveat with this is I wouldn't focus on pictures from like 3 years ago if you have those saved in your Google Drive somewhere. That's kind of weird, but like events from the month that you're doing your newsletter for. So let's say you're doing a September newsletter and you have events from August, put those in there if they haven't been represented somewhere else. The next point, making your newsletter excessively long. It's obviously a don't, especially because I used a negative word, excessively. For club newsletters, I would recommend at max 5 pages, unless your club is just doing the most. I would even recommend like 2 to 3 as like an average for your newsletters, not including a cover page, but yeah, you don't want to bore your members. You don't want them having to flip over and over and over through several pages of a newsletter. It's not something anyone likes. I, of all people, definitely know what I'm talking about there because my Circle Caper sometimes gets a little long-winded and I have to stop myself from giving so much information that I know is good information, but it ruins the information flow because there's just so much of it and it suddenly becomes an obstacle. So you don't want to do that. This next one, adhering to CLE graphic standards. I personally say that's a maybe. I'd say it's great if you want to go for it. An example of the graphic standards is this PowerPoint that you're looking at right now. We can break it down a little bit. This color is a brand guide color. This font's a brand guide font. This PowerPoint was made from an international template. And so those are some things about graphic standards. They're cute, but sometimes they hamper on creativity a little bit. Yeah, I would say that's more of a maybe. Definitely do it if you want to. More power to you, but you don't have to. Cluttering pages. Again, I used a obviously negative word there. Clutter. That's a bad thing to do. You don't want to throw 8 different pictures on one page and like overlap them and look really tacky. It creates a distraction on your page. It doesn't make what the purpose of the page is clear. And it just doesn't look good, to be honest. And if you need more help with making sure to not clutter pages in future newsletters, always send me your newsletters and I will tell you pretty straightforward if it's cluttered or not. Using CKI graphics, this is separate from the graphic standards. These are just like CKI approved graphics, so like a logo from CKI, a word mark, certain like shapes like carrots, stuff like that. I would say that's always a good thing to include. It definitely helps if you also use this point, but some of the graphics on their own are more general and not like specific to CKI. So there's stuff like stripes that are specific to CKI that don't have to necessarily go with the rest of the brand guide, if that makes any sense. And if you want to know where those graphics are, they are circlek.org under marketing resources. So you can download it as like a zip file, I think is how it looks like. Alrighty, so general tips for your newsletter. More general tips, I should say. Reaching out for help from your club board, LTG, or me as your district editor. If you are struggling with what you want to write about, those three sources all have a lot of great information that you could create articles out of. I would definitely focus more on your club board because your club is more interested in club level activities, but your LTG and I as your district editor can always give you more information about district and international functions. And so if you want to include like all three levels of CKI, go for it. And that doesn't necessarily just have to be limited to help from material wise. You can also ask me specifically for design help. Maybe you want to come up with a color palette. I can show you how I do that. Some general other tips and tricks on how to make your newsletters just a bit more flashier, stuff like that. Sticking to a consistent publishing schedule. So consistency is always good to have whenever you're any sort of like marketing or public relations position. You want to make sure that you are establishing a pattern that is recognizable by your club. So maybe you set the precedent that it's really special on the first day of every month for your club to read your brand new newsletter, or the 15th of every other month, et cetera, et cetera. I would just highly recommend sticking to it. It also helps with just organizing yourself as an editor. Like, if you say like, this month I'll do it on this day, this month I'll do it on this day, you're going to cause yourself more stress because you're not going to have strict deadlines to follow. And you're not going to be able to hold yourself as accountable for that. The next point, sharing your newsletters everywhere, including non-club members. This can be reached out to Kiwanis clubs, maybe your local key clubs if they're interested, if you have like seniors that are interested in understanding what CKI is. Sharing it with community partners. Maybe your club has a strong relationship with your local community and how you do service with your local community. So maybe, I don't know, like a local congressman or something, or a local just like nonprofit leader. I don't know, you can share your newsletter with them. You just want it to go in as many hands as possible, as many eyes to see it, because that means that your newsletter is more useful. Making it in Microsoft Publisher, Canva, PowerPoint, or Adobe InDesign. Out of those 4 platforms that I laid out, I would recommend Publisher or Canva the most. PowerPoint, I mean, we've all used PowerPoint at some point in our lives. It's definitely possible to make a newsletter in PowerPoint. It's definitely not the most recognizable format for a newsletter, I would say. It's like weird. I personally have never seen a club newsletter made in PowerPoint, but if you only want to do that, go for it. The benefits of Publisher and Canva is that they're more so designed for design focus. So they're really easy to move images around. They're really easy to make colored palettes in. They're really easy to access, in my opinion. Once you like jump into it and like figure it out and like play around with all the different functions, it's pretty easy user experience. I would definitely say if this is like your first time making a newsletter, Canva is like the better option because Microsoft Publisher is just a blank slate. Doesn't really hold your hand at all. You just kind of go into it. And that's the same thing with Adobe InDesign. You just kind of jump into it and make what you want to make. But Canva is definitely much more of a user-friendly experience. It has things like templates, pre-made graphics, the whole works that help you build your newsletter. And then that last point at the bottom is to save your newsletter as a PDF. You don't want your club members to like open up a publisher file or a PowerPoint file. You just want to make it easy PDF. It's universally readable. It's a much smaller file size. So if you upload it to a separate platform like Issue for the reading experience, it uploads a lot easier, stuff like that. The Circle Capers. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the Circle Capers is my newsletter. I don't call it a newsletter because it's not really a newsletter, but it's my publication. It's produced bi-monthly. I'm actually switching that. It's actually more of a monthly publication now, but yeah, it's for everywhere in the Florida district, for every division, every club. It's also a pretty good reference for types of materials that can go in your own newsletter. So something that I included in my most recent one was information about our fall event, also known as Personal Professional Development Conference, PPDC. So maybe if your club has like a workshop day separate from like a club meeting, or if you're having workshops as a focus of your next meeting, you can talk about that in your newsletter. You know, your newsletter can really be anything you want it to be, as long as it's helpful. You can also feel free to use the circle capers as like inspiration for your own page designs. And you can go past my term, you can go back to other years. A lot of them have a lot of good small details that if you learn how to replicate can really help you learn how to do more graphic design. I know something that I like to do is I like to purposefully layer dark behind light color graphics to create like a shadow effect. It helps add dimension to your pages. You know, there's so many little tips and tricks that you figure out as you make more and more newsletters. And so you just have to figure out what you want to incorporate in your own style. For the circle capers, if you want to see your own club represented in the circle caper, so like a club spotlight, maybe you want to spotlight a specific member from your club, a specific service project that your club did, you can always submit articles to my email, which is right there, editor@FloridaCircleK. I will also probably be reaching out directly, being like, hey, give me some information, give me some material. I always love spotlighting clubs because it makes my job more interesting. Additional duties as editor that is not related to your club newsletters. A lot of these are more like one-off duties, things that you don't really think about when you think of being an editor. Always training your successor. That's the same with any position. You always want to make sure you have an easy transfer of power. Something specific about editor is making sure that you give your not predecessor, successor the tools that they need. So login information, putting all of that on a doc somewhere. Maybe you can talk about the things that you're publishing in your newsletters every month. So maybe you have some notes from a September newsletter that we're talking about, hey, we had this park cleanup or something. I don't know, that's just an example. And so creating like a transition timeline is absolutely key to being an editor and having a successful transfer of power. That also includes handing off resources like past photos, your own newsletters, making sure it's all housed in one central, easy to locate location. Another duty that's more of a one-off duty that your club might make you do as club editor is your club t-shirt. I've also seen a lot of clubs open it up as like a t-shirt design contest for anyone in the club, but some clubs prefer to just have their editor do it. And so the tool I use for that is customink.com. They're pretty good about customer service, pricing. They're also, I believe, one of the only official like licensed partners with Kiwanis, so that you can use like the Circle K seal on your shirt, because that's normally something that goes on a shirt, for instance. And so yeah, making sure that you do that through a licensed partner so that you don't get threatened with a cease and desist letter. Copyrights. The next point is the club scrapbook. And so that goes also back to you. The club scrapbook isn't really a one-off duty. It's more of a thing that you should be doing regularly throughout the year if your club chooses to submit a scrapbook, or just having a scrapbook for your own records. I could do a whole separate presentation on club scrapbooks and scrapbooking skills, because I love scrapbooking. Back in Key Club, I won, what was it? It was either second or third place overall in the district for Florida Key Club for the club scrapbook. I love scrapbooking. And then we won fourth the next year. I love that for us. Back to the presentation though. Flyers and advertisements. These generally will fall to you as an editor. That goes back to public relations and advertiser in the first slide. So, you know, posting recruitment flyers on your campus, creating recruitment flyer or tabling materials when clubs eventually go back to physical tabling. You know, any of that falls back to you as editor. You are like the main point person when it comes to creating like resources for your club, because you should be a pretty good eye for like graphic design and like details orientation and all that stuff. Website, if your club decides to have a website, that's normally something that like only bigger clubs tend to need, But yeah, if you want to do a website, I think I have another slide about this later on, but I personally recommend Wix or Weebly as platforms for creating a website. You also see in parentheses if there's no webmaster, so that can sometimes be in a board and appointed position in your club already, is having a separate webmaster from the editor. And they tend to work together pretty well. So like if the webmaster needs pictures, you as editor would give them said pictures, et cetera, et cetera. And then social media, if there's no PR or marketing chair, obviously Instagram, Facebook. I wouldn't really recommend Twitter or Snapchat. It'd be interesting to see like a CKI club doing TikTok. Like that'd be kind of funny. I'd love to see it. But yeah, Facebook and Instagram are probably the biggest, most useful platforms for the purposes of club. But yeah, there can also be a separate PR chair that handles that. For instance, on the district level, I serve as district editor, but I have a separate district PR chair that does our social media. But we work hand in hand a lot because our duties tend to not like 100% overlap, but they tend to cross over into each other a lot. Oh, I do have a slide about the website. Oh my gosh, fun. The website, it's a great central location for information storage. So Google Drive is like a great central location, but it's not like the most transparent for your club. And so you might incorporate a club Google Drive into a website. But the website's more of a member-facing product. Should be updated regularly. Wix, Weebly, and Squarespace are great tools for making one. My personal favorite is Wix. I'm right now remaking the district website on Wix to be released soon. But yeah, I like Wix the most. It's probably the best if you have a good sense of design, I would say. Weebly is also probably like right there in the same tier. I've used Weebly before. I just have more experience with Wix. And Squarespace, I don't really know much about it, to be honest. I just know that it is another platform that I've heard is very successful for website design. But I personally recommend Wix. And the next point, once the new district website is published, so that's me, feel free to use it as inspiration. It will be at floridacirclek.org. If you visit that website address right now, I am sorry for your eyes. But yeah, it's going to be released soon, I promise. Social media, updating regularly. Members will forget it exists otherwise. So making sure that even if it feels like spammy, like you're just making post after post after post after post, it's better than the alternative, which is doing one post like a month. You want to show up on your members' feeds, your members' timelines, whatever. They blow up their notifications to make sure that they are involved in your club and are aware of what your club is doing. Post about events. You can also post about past events. So that's the importance of having pictures. Creating hashtags for members to use. There's other hashtags in Circle K. So like hashtag choose CKI is an international one. Hashtag wash us make a difference for the Watch Project. There's a lot of random hashtags out there, but maybe you want to make one specific for your club. For example, like UNF, hashtag swoop for service. I don't know. Let's see the next one. Canva and Linktree are great social media tools. Canva is great for actually making posts. We talked about it a little bit earlier for making newsletters, but it's also great for making social media posts. And then Linktree is a great thing to put in your bio to help organize different resources that you want on your social media, but you don't want to necessarily just bomb with posts about. So you can like make a post about it and then say a link in bio, and it goes to a link tree that's in your bio that then has a bunch of things listed out. So like maybe your Zoom meeting link, registration link for an event, registration link for district events, whatever you want in that link tree. This next point is really important. Having pictures with people it has a bigger impact on members than having pictures with Canva graphics. So Canva graphics are pretty recognizable. Like when you see a post, you're like, oh, that was made on Canva. And they don't tend to get as much engagement, interaction as pictures with people in them. So like, for instance, like a picture of a past event might have 40 likes, but a Canva graphic saying what happened at the last event would probably only get like 20 likes. The next point, creating an environment where members are proud to interact. Having things like member spotlights, bringing your members into the fold. So it's not so you don't have like a gap in communication. You want your members to care that they're in CKI. You want them to like being in CKI. You want them to post about being in CKI, because then maybe their friends will come join CKI. Creating that environment and culture where your members are proud to be in CKI. Some example platforms, I mentioned these earlier, haven't seen any CKI TikToks yet. But yeah, Instagram, Facebook group. Facebook like page, I wouldn't recommend as much as I would recommend a Facebook group page. Facebook group page is a little bit more personalized and in my opinion, a little bit easier to manage than a Facebook like page, but whatever your club needs, go for it. This is kind of like a random side conversation, but the Outstanding Editor Award. This is a great guideline for a list of things to think about throughout the year. Editor is like a really weird position because it's so flexible in the amount of different things that you do as editor. So when this Outstanding Editor Award information comes out, it's a great guideline to figure out what are things that you can be doing as an editor. If you specifically actually want to go for the award, your newsletters are judged on a couple different categories that are listed there. Having representation from club, international, and district level, having education about your K-Fam, local Kiwanis family relations, and then having a fun other section, which can be like puzzles, outside of CKI, etc. Those are all just random things that you can earn points for to make your newsletters more of outstanding newsletters. It is a Decon award, so if you want to go for the award and actually get the award, it's great for resumes to show that you're dedicated to your duties and that you were outstanding in your position. That is actually the end of the PowerPoint, the end of the presentation. And so if you have any questions, here are 3 different resources / contacts. Your lieutenant governor, and if you don't know who your lieutenant governor is, email me and I'll figure it out. But whatever division you're a part of at Florida Circle K, if you want a contact person from the district level, I'm also always available for you as a club editor, sending me your newsletters, asking me questions about what you should be doing in your newsletters, design tips. I'm your guy. And then the district website has a few updates every now and then, but it'll be better once the new website's up. But there are still resources on that website that are still pretty pertinent to you as a club editor. This video itself will end up being there at some point, as well as the PowerPoint that I am presenting with will be on the website. And so I almost asked if y'all had any questions as if y'all were here right now. I'm going to end the presentation. Thank you so much for watching all the way to this point. I hope it was informative. It might have been a little bit awkward at times, but that's just because I'm awkward. If you have any more questions that were not answered in this PowerPoint or presentation, please email me. I love getting emails from club editors. It makes my job more bearable. I just love knowing what y'all are up to. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Bye, everyone.